In the year 711, the Moors drove out the Visigoths and occupied Spain, inaugurating an era of civilization and religious toleration. Especially in the 9th, 10th, and 11th centuries, the Jews of the Iberian Peninsula, living under Muslim rule, displayed extraordinary creativity in philosophy and literature, especially poetry. This period ended with the expulsion of the Jews in 1492 from Spain by the Roman Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella, and a few years later from Portugal. To this day, it is known as the Golden Age of Spanish Jewry. Hello, I'm Leonard Nimoy. Welcome to another program in a 13-part series that celebrates 3.5 centuries of uninterrupted Jewish life in the United States through music, as documented by the Milken Archive of American Jewish Music and issued on CD on the Naxos label. On today's program, music inspired by the culture of the Jews with ancestral roots on the Iberian Peninsula, the Sephardim. Neil Levin, the artistic director of the Milken Archive, tells the story of the Iberian Jews after the expulsion in conversation with conductor Gerard Schwartz.
The majority of the Jews who accepted the expulsion, by which I mean to say did not accept conversion, went back to Muslim-ruled lands because they had flourished in the golden age of Spanish Jewry under Muslim rule. Places such as North Africa, Mediterranean areas, Turkey, Greece, so forth. A smaller number, about 100 years later, who had converted to Christianity and remained in Spain, decided that they wanted to retake their Jewish roots. They went to Amsterdam, and then from there to a few other European cities, but Amsterdam was kind of the capital of what became the Western Sephardi tradition. Those are the Jews who came to the United States in 1654 from an earlier Dutch area in Brazil and established the first American Jewish community and the first American synagogue. Those were Western Sephardim. And by the American Revolution, there were about 5,000 Jews, mostly, not all, but mostly of the Western Sephardi tradition, which by that time was Amsterdam-London.
On a musical level now, the Sephardi has influenced composers in some ways more yet than the Ashkenazi because of the basic rhythmic, folk-like, exciting elements that this music represents.
I think a lot of that is the interest in the other. It's the interest in the exotic.
It seems to me that so much of what we do in traditional Jewish music is vocal, and of course deals with a lot with language. So now, what about the special Sephardi language? What about Ladino? How does it relate to how it's sung, what we understand, to Spanish, to Hebrew? What's the relationship?
Ladino, which is also known as Judeo-Espanol, is a mixture of Castilian Spanish, 15th century Spanish, not modern Spanish, and Hebrew, primarily. And it was the kind of vernacular, the daily spoken language of Sephardi Jewry in the Mediterranean areas, the daily spoken language of Greek Jews up through the 20th century was, at least in part, Ladino or Judeo-Espanol. It's a secular language. It's analogous in many ways to Yiddish for Ashkenazi Jewry. Yiddish is a mixture of 12th century German and Hebrew, plus some other Slavic languages. Ladino, the interest in it in music is astounding in a way and understandable in another way because it's this fascination with something that we didn't know about until recently, and it was always there, and that's fascinating in itself. And there is a very rich literature of Ladino poetry, folk poetry, and songs.
Music historian and musicologist Neil Levin talking with Gerard Schwartz. Let's listen now to what may well be the first Hebrew liturgical setting ever created on American soil. It's a melody for 3 verses from Psalm 118, Baruch haba, blessed be he who comes in the name of the Lord. The tune was brought to the New World by the Sephardim in the 17th century from their Amsterdam repertoire. This particular arrangement for these psalm verses was put together expressly for the consecration ceremony of Congregation Mikvah Israel in 1782 in Philadelphia during the Revolutionary War. It was sung during the procession, completely in unison, just as we hear it in this Milken archive recording. The soloist here is Chazan Ira Rode, presently the cantor of the Spanish and Portuguese synagogue in New York, Sheret Israel, America's first synagogue, dating to 1654. Neil Levin conducts Schola Hebraica in Baruch Haba from Psalm 118.